Hey guys, we're here today in Valheim and we're going to be going over how to build a Viking pit house. The Viking longhouse is the most known style of Viking building and gets most of all the glory, but the Viking pit house was used very often as well and was a partially subterranean house built large enough for whole families and also had the room to run businesses out of for people like blacksmiths and smelters. We're going to go over how to build this, mark out terrain and dig it down, and make a large pit house with enough room for everything you need in Valheim. And the first thing I'm going to do is place down a couple workbenches and flatten out the work area just a bit. It does not need to be perfect, but it will help us lay out where we're going to dig. Now we are going to be building a fairly large house here, being 7 by 10. Now we are going to be creating an outline, so what we're actually going to do is be going 8 wide to start. The reason we're going slightly wider is this is actually a border of where I'm going to dig. So what I want to do is when I go downside, I want to have 7 spots in the center so I know that my actual hole is 7 wide. You could use wood beams and poles to line this out, but I'm going to be doing floor so I don't have any trouble seeing it as I'm digging and it's fairly wide instead of just being a wood beam. Since we're going 10 long, that means including this front row, we're 11, but in the standing area on the dirt, we're going to be 10 long. And then we need to go one more after our 10th one, again, for the outline to go along the back, so we know that the hole itself is 10 long. Alright, once we got that entire section marked out, it is time to do a whole bunch of digging. And I know that I'm going to want to do roughly 2 walls deep, so I can place them as I go to kind of give myself a marker of how low I need to get. You just need that on one spot to roughly get how deep you need to go. And we are able to fill in this pit on the sides a little bit more, but the important thing you want to do is make sure you don't have any parts coming within the edge of your outline. And make sure you dig plenty wide so you have plenty of room to operate in here until you fill it back in on the sides. Alright, and once you finish digging, your outline is not needed anymore, so if some of it broke, like mine did here, that's not a big deal at all. And you can see this pit is kind of huge. You can build this pit house much smaller than this, but I'm going to show you how to build it with pretty much everything you need inside of it. But if you're looking to do just a smaller outpost, that is definitely possible and way more manageable. We are going to be using the outline for one last thing. We are going to roughly place our first wall along the ground and roughly even with our outline on the outer edge. And then we'll be ignoring it after that point and going our 10 spaces off of that new wall. And if you are starting to lose stability because it's not fully touching the wall, we are going to be filling in the ground around it. So even right now, you can go ahead and try and level it or raise the ground and get it to make contact. Or if you'd like, you can just place a little beam underneath it to get it enough stability so you can finish building. We are able to place all 10 walls along that side, but you can see here, even according to my outline, I'm a little bit tight on the floor here, so we just need to clear that out a little bit. And finish walling in the 10 by 7 area. Alright, the outline is completely done. I'm going to go ahead and destroy the rest of my upper outline. And you can remove one of the pieces and make it a door and then just do a ramp out. But I don't want a giant long ramp for mine, so I am going to use ladders a little bit on the interior. And then just place the door up one level higher so that my ramp outside is not quite as big. We'll use a little bit of stone and raise the ground right in front of the door. And flatten it a bit. And that's going to take a little bit of tinkering with to get it to work just fine. And then we will go ahead and dig our ramp out. Just walk into the wall as tight as you got, and then pick until you have a very smooth ramp out. Alrighty, now we're going to take 45-degree roofing on the sides, and we're just going to be going up straight to a peak. Alright, and once the roofing is all completed, we will go ahead and wall in the front and the back angles with the various angle and square pieces that we need. Alright, and that means our interior is almost done. You can see out here that the edges of where we dug are kind of straight, and we'd rather it be more mounded and covering up to the edge of the roof. So we're going to use our hoe, alternating between raising ground when we need and flattening ground in order to get it all the way to touch the roof. After Valheim's latest patch, the ability to raise ground by touching the edge of ground and raising the entire section is now gone. That's a huge disappointment for a lot of people, but for us and building this pit home is actually a huge bonus. That was the issue before with building this pit house, is when you would try to raise the ground to fill in the gaps, it would raise everything inside the house and would be very difficult to work with. But what we're going to do is level ground out as much as possible, and when needed, we'll raise small sections up with all the stone that we dug out to make the hole in the first place, and then continue leveling it out and alternating between those two around the entire house. Alrighty, and once we get the entire outside edge all mounded up to the house, we will get mounds inside the house again. And this will be kind of a give and take you have back and forth. If you dig inside, it's going to pop outside, and if you do outside, it's going to pop in. We do want to dig out the inside again just a little bit, but make sure that you are not all the way up against it and you're backed up. So you can dig out as little as possible and you're okay with this rock wall look, but you want to make it as roomy as you can. And you need to decide how much room you want in here, because if you push too far to the walls, it's going to start digging out what you did outside. And while you are digging out the inside again, I would recommend not using the hoe along the wall to flatten any of the stuff you just did, because if you get too close, the hoe does reach a little wider than the pick and has a higher shot of flattening what you did on the exterior. But I have a fairly roomy interior, and I'm okay with how much is mounted on the outside, and it's all pretty close to the building. Last landscaping thing we're going to do is turn all of the dirt around the outside to grass, which will make it look a lot more like the house has been here for a while and that nature has grown back around it. And then for aesthetic purposes, we are going to throw a 45-degree cross on the front and the back. And now we are done with the framing part of this. A lot of things that I've read on pit houses say they had a large fire in the center, so we're going to use the hearth and place it right in the middle. And there is no need for a chimney because the high roofs will collect the smoke without any issue. And I've also heard that a lot of times these pit homes were used by blacksmiths, so they had a living space and a workspace that were together. So we're going to go ahead and throw down ourselves a smelter and a kiln, and there's plenty of room for it. Because we've gone with the hearth, we're able to get ourselves a cauldron and plenty of cooking stations. And then we're going to go ahead and furnish it for comfort. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we are 10 spaces deep, and as I've said in other videos covering comfort items only reach roughly 8 to 10 meters, which is about 4 to 5 spaces deep. So if you place a comfort item like a banner up on the front of the building, it is only going to give you comfort about halfway through the building. So anytime you're placing a bigger item, such as your dragon bed, I would recommend trying to place it more centered out in the building, roughly in the middle, so that it reaches throughout the entire area, both directions. And then smaller items like banners, you can go ahead and do one on the front and the back, and it'll last you through the whole area. You have a lot more freedom in the area if you're willing to build multiple of anything such as a chair or a table. And then the bigger items maybe just put in the center area so you have comfort throughout most of the house. And then obviously something like the brazier where it produces smoke, we'd like to set it up high. So as high as you can reach and maybe in the center and just throw it up there so it's out of the way. And you can see we got 17 comfort. That 17 comfort does not last throughout the entire area when I get on the sides or the corners. So you can add more of the same items if you have the materials for it to reach everywhere else, or design it a little different where the hearth maybe is not in the middle. I just did that because that seems to be what historically they did, so we're trying to make this as accurate as possible. Another thing to keep in mind when furnishing or placing anything is you can see like here a fermenter is having trouble getting down. You can get it in some places on the floor, but if it's not going exactly where you want because the floor is uneven, you can just add a floor piece and then place the fermenter on top of that piece. And if you're okay with that look, just go with that. If not, you can remove the floor under it, and because it's still touching stone, it is going to have fine stability. You can fill in the ground under it, but if the ground is not level enough to place something, just place it on a floor piece and ignore the ground and then fill the ground in under it. You can definitely see why the Vikings used this home style. You've got good insulation with the dirt walls and floor, plenty of height for smoke to dissipate up without needing a proper chimney, and it might feel a little cramped inside, but it has a ton of room in here. We've got a fully working forge, workbench, we got a kiln, a blast furnace, smelter, and full 17 comfort. Plenty of room for cooking and fermenting. And it looks pretty cool on the outside. Doesn't look too oversized or large on the exterior since we have most of it buried underground. And with the ground built up along the edges of it, it actually gives our roof full stability on the bottom, which means you could even go bigger with this. And keeps everything kind of neat and small on the exterior, but gives you a fairly massive interior. Well guys, hopefully this guide was helpful to you on building a unique looking house with plenty of room for storage, all of your workshop needs, and comfort. And maybe gives you a slightly different look than the various longhouses that you've seen, and might set you apart in the world of Valheim. Thanks for watching, I will see you next time.